Uddhava Punjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Adi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Radhi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Radhi Jasodanandana Brajachanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajachanaranjana Jamanatira Vanachadi Jamanatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Madhava Punjabi Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Radhi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Radhi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Radhi Gopi Jana Vallabha Jasodanandana Brajachanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajachanaranjana Jamanatira Vanachadi Jamanatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Adi Madhava Punjabi Adi Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Harivajagacharya Astatara Satasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Canto 11, Chapter 8, Texts 40 to 41. A little background because some of you may not have been keeping up with this discussion, Uddhava Gita. Little background. This is the second of a whole series of chapters where Krishna is instructing Uddhava, as you see. The scene is Dwarka. Uddhava has understood Krishna is soon going to depart, and he understands that because of the closeness of their relationship. So he goes to Krishna, falls at his feet, and asks him two things. Please take me with you. And the second thing is, I want to understand you more deeply, but I'm too attached to family and the temporary. And so, how do I become free from attachment? So there's 3 chapters, 7, 8, and 9. This is the second of the 3 chapters, in which jnana vairagya, that facilitates bhakti, is explained. So in chapter 7, Krishna gives a preliminary response. Then Uddhava says, yeah, but it's difficult. And so Krishna says, let me tell you a story. And the story is the story of an Avadhuta Brahmin who instructs King Yadu. King Yadu is the predecessor, ancestor for both Krishna and Uddhava. Yadu. They're in the Yadu dynasty. So Yadu saw this Avadhuta Brahmin and said, hey, how did you become so detached? How did you become an Avadhuta? And you have these qualifications, those qualifications, but you're so detached. How did it happen? The Avadhuta Brahmin said, I learned from 24 gurus. And the 24 gurus are all kinds of different things. The wind, the earth, fire, the sky, birds, and etc. And this chapter 8 is titled Lessons Learned from Pingala, in the Sanskrit it's Pingala Gita. Pingala Gita is within Uddhava Gita. And Pingala is a prostitute in Videha. Videha is the capital of King Janak. And so after describing Pingala, her character, her profession, her nature, it describes one evening she was on her porch waiting for somebody to come, and nobody came, and at midnight the light went on. And she's feeling great regret, and somehow she's feeling total detached, and she's feeling feelings of devotion and surrender, and she's saying, I'm going to pay the price of full surrender because I want to be connected with the Supreme Personality, not Godhead, not temporary men or anything temporary of this world. So, jnana and vairagya, properly deployed, lead to bhakti. Or the obstacle for, one of the obstacles for bhakti is attachment. And we're going to hear about it in these 2 verses. Attachment is an obstacle. Attachment to the temporary, attachment to being the enjoyer of the temporary is an obstacle for bhakti. So when that obstacle is removed, then at least the door is open for bhakti. Now, there is such a thing as, without bhakti, knowledge that leads to detachment. So that's not what he's speaking, or that's not what Krishna is indicating to Uddhava, or what Yadu is being indicated by the Avadhuta Brahmin. or what Pingala is saying in her prayers. So we just have to be clear. What's the function of Gyan? That is to say it another way. When Bhakti awakens, Gyan is already there. So there's some question, how did Pingala get this epiphany? And there's not, our Acharya's comment, some authorities say, there's two different versions. Some authorities say Dattatreya visited her house. He slept in her yard and she saw him, and she fed him and she cleaned the yard and she did some service. She offered her respects and did some service. And that opened the door. Another possibility, or some authorities, it doesn't give details, but they say, Vishwanath speaks the first one. Second one is some of the sadhus in Videha, she served them. Not like she sat down and attended Bhagavatam class on a regular basis, or sat at their feet and heard detailed descriptions of Krishna Tattva or something, but she did some service, the power of serving a sadhu. And although she was sinful, that she wasn't offensive towards the Lord or his devotees. That was helpful. And so she's now describing bhakti, that is the byproduct, or has come awakened after knowledge and detachment. So we're going to verse number 40. Santushta, completely satisfied. Shraddha dati, having complete faith. Etat, in the Lord's mercy. She's understood, somehow the Lord was pleased with me. That's how I have become detached, and that's how I am having some affection for him, and I'm feeling very grateful, extremely grateful. I am now completely satisfied, and I have full faith in the Lord's mercy. Therefore, I will maintain myself with whatever comes of its own accord. I shall enjoy life with only the Lord, because he is the real source of love and happiness. Bhaktisiddhanta made a commentary on the entire Uddhava Gita. It's now published, the translation in English. And here's his translation of that same verse. I have firm faith in the favor of Sri Hari, and I am satisfied to accept whatever he provides for my maintenance. I will only enjoy the association of Sri Hari, who is the actual source of all love and happiness. Bhaktisiddhanta's purport: one never commits any sin or offense if he utilizes all material objects in the service of Lord Krishna and accepts whatever comes of its own accord for his maintenance. Paragraph. Desire for material enjoyment arises as soon as there is an absence of the propensity to render loving service to the Supreme Lord. This is the root cause of all material miseries. So this is a theme that plays in different teachings. Desire is the root of suffering. Specifically here, desire separate from the Lord is the root of suffering. Ignorant desires, root of suffering. While utilizing this material propensity for serving the Supreme Lord, one is able to see everything within the material world as meant for the Lord's enjoyment rather than his own enjoyment. Thus, one sees the material world as an opportunity for engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. In Krishna consciousness, one's conditional life is dissolved, and one becomes qualified to establish true friendship with other devotees in the course of rendering loving service to the Supreme Lord. That was Bhaktisiddhanta. There's no BBT purport for this. This is Bhaktisiddhanta's purport. And what Bhaktisiddhanta has done is he's taken Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, because he commented it on every verse in the whole Bhagavatam. So he summarizes or makes a gloss of Vishwanath's commentary. Pingala thought, if someone were to ask, what will you do after surrendering to Sri Hari? The answer is that I will enjoy life with whatever I receive by his mercy. I will only enjoy the association of Sri Hari, who alone is capable of giving me real pleasure. And what Vishwanath actually writes, what does she desire to do after surrendering? That is explained. What does she have faith in? She has faith that she will enjoy with the Lord. Okay, so now here's some interesting references too. They're both from Jiva Goswami's Bhakti Sandarbha. Bhakti Sandarbha, you all know what that is. In Bhakti Sandarbha, he makes reference to this verse, what Pingala speaks. What Pingala's speech gets a lot of attention in Jiva Goswami's writings, different places. So, thus, Pingala's taste for ragatmika bhakti has been indicated. Now, I've written to one scholar, Danadhar Swami, who wrote a book on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Waves of Devotion, asking a question. Previously, my understanding was the ragatmika status is for the eternal associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. But here, Jiva Goswami, and it's not only this place, other places, indicates that she, Pingala, is becoming attached to being like, or in the, not a competitor of, but being like Lakshmi. So Lakshmi is the ragatmika personality, and she's performing raga nuga bhakti, according to Jiva Goswami, what I've understood from what Jiva Goswami writes. So, clarification, please. And I haven't gotten a reply, but I'll just read again what it says. Thus, Pingala's taste for ragatmika bhakti has been indicated. Her behavior in raga nuga is described as follows. This verse. Satisfied, Jiva Goswami is translating this 10.840, satisfied, having faith in the Lord, and maintaining myself with whatever comes of its own accord, I shall enjoy life with only the Lord, because He is the real source of love and happiness. Paragraph. I will enjoy with this husband, having such bhava, or amuna ramanena, using my mind in the path predominated by taste. The mind is predominant, since one must relate using the mind in serving the Lord if one has not attained the spiritual form of the Lord's beloved. This raganuga, where raga, the attachment of the mind to the Lord, and in a particular mood. Her particular mood is like the wife. So instead of hanging out with men, being a prostitute, I want to make the Lord as the one who I'm serving, and to rely upon Him only for my happiness and satisfaction, in that mood of a wife. Raga. And the explanation is in raga or raganuga, when one doesn't yet have one's spiritual form, that raga, or strong affinity for serving the Lord in a particular mood. There are different ways of defining what raga is, but she sees everything that way. That's a raga nuga bhakta, or raga nuga bhakti. I'll read it again. In the path predominated by taste, the mind is predominant, since one must relate using the mind in serving the Lord if one has not attained the spiritual form of the Lord's beloved. To act as the wife in the present body in relation to the deity is rejected. This is also for acting as parent or other identities Pingala speaks. Now here's another translation, another translator's rendering of, this is Bhakti Sandarbha 311. The activities of Raganuga Bhakti are described in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is the verse, this text 40. I am now completely satisfied and have full faith in the Lord's mercy. Therefore, I will maintain myself with whatever comes of its own accord. I shall enjoy life with only the Lord, because He is the real source of love and happiness. This verse means, quote, in my mind, Atmana, I will enjoy Viharami with him, Amuna, my affectionate lover, unquote. The mind is mentioned here because the mind is most important in the path of attraction, ruchi, to the Lord. Because she did not have the spiritual form of a beloved of the Lord, Pingala engaged her mind in meditating on the Lord in this way. Deity worship tends to remove the boldness, parentheses, that is a natural part of amorous pastimes, close parentheses. Therefore, deity worship naturally leads to Vatsalya rasa, where one is a parent or other guardian of the Lord. This verse was spoken by Sri Pingala. Text 41. The intelligence of the living entity is stolen away by activities of sense gratification, and thus he falls into the dark well of material existence. Within that well, he is then seized by the deadly serpent of time. What else but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save the poor living entity from such a hopeless condition? He's my only shelter. Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now there is a BBT purport. This is not Prabhupada. Pingala stated in a previous verse that even the demigods are unable to give actual happiness to a woman. One may question, who has authorized this lady to reject even such exalted personalities as Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods? The answer given here is that if one actually wants to solve all the problems of life and go back home, back to Godhead, then the only solution is to take exclusive shelter, to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is well known that the demigods themselves are subject to birth and death, as stated by Lord Shiva himself, Mukti Pradata Sarvesham Vishnu Eva Na Samshayaha. There is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone. Okay, so here's Bhakti Siddhanta's purport for this verse. The conditioned souls are bitten by the snake of time because they consider themselves to be the enjoyers of the temporary material world, which is experienced by the senses as sound, form, taste, touch, and smell. This spirit of enjoying, separate from the Lord, is the reason for their falling into the dark well of material existence. Paragraph. Still, the all-merciful Supreme Lord has made many arrangements to deliver the fallen conditioned souls from the dark well of material enjoyment by engaging them in His devotional service. Bhakti Siddhanta paraphrases Vishwanath's commentary this way. One may argue, why did Pingala surrender to Vishnu instead of one of the other demigods like Brahma? The answer is, But no one but Lord Vishnu is capable of delivering the living entities who are drowning in the dark well of material existence and are thus blinded by their spirit of material enjoyment and devoured by the poisonous snake of time. Here's what Vishwanath writes. Why are you so eager to give up worshipping the Devatas for Vishnu? This verse answers. Now, Jiva Goswami has commented on this verse in Krama Sandarbha. What's Krama Sandarbha? Krama Sandarbha is, other than the 6 Sandarbhas, it's the verse by verse, not every single verse by verse commentary of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam called Krama Sandarbha. This is Bhanu Swami's translation. Who else but the Supreme Lord can save the living entity who has fallen into the well of samsara, has become blinded by sense objects, and has been devoured by the snake of time? I surrender to him alone, since no one else can save the living entity. Now, there's reference to this Pingala verse. Dhruta Karma Prabhu was requested many years ago, 10, 12, whatever it was, years ago, to write a book on the origin of the jiva and the jiva's fall. So this is reference to this verse is found in 2 sections. He quotes the verse and then comments. In this text, we can see that in its original condition, the soul was possessed of active intelligence. By misuse of intelligence, the soul falls into the material world. The Sanskrit word translates as, quote, intelligence, which is ikshanam, given in the word meanings as vision. Taken in this way, the indication is that the soul was possessed of active transcendental senses in its original condition. So I don't want to get into a discussion about the fall of the jiva, but even reading it before reading what Dhruta, there's more, but I won't go into it. He is advocating the fall of the jiva. There are those that advocate the other, not just 15 years ago, but current time. Some people say this, some people say that. Misuse of free will is definitely operative. Placing that as an event within time is another story. So that's the 2 verses for this morning. There's a nice devotee, Shruti Mangara, who has very kindly made illustrations for some of this. And I really like her artwork, so here we go. There's a well, there's a serpent at the bottom of the well, and that's the serpent of time. And so she's taken a passage from the verse that reads this. The intelligence of the living entity is stolen away by activities of sense gratification, and thus he falls into the dark well of material existence. Within that well, he is then seized by the deadly serpent of time. Who else but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save the poor living entity from such a helpless condition? Signed, Pingala. I'm going to appeal to the persons in the room and the online individuals. Please don't go into the fall of the jiva topic. I really wish to not go there. So please don't go there, because I won't answer it. I'll pass. Because it's an unending thing, and different sides and all that stuff. But for sure, intelligence is stolen away by sense gratification and thus material existence. So we have to redirect our intelligence. And here's from verse 42, which we didn't get to yet, but material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. Now, if you're a Buddhist, you'll go, yay, see, this confirms material desire. But they don't even just say material desire, they say desire. And I'm happy to have discussion on this. You know, the distinction, one of the big distinctions between impersonalism and Buddhism and bhakti, or, you know, gyan and vairagya that doesn't lead to bhakti, and gyan and vairagya that leads to bhakti, or bhakti promotes gyan and vairagya. The obstacle, so it's very simple. Buddhism, the root cause of suffering is desire. To become free from suffering, become free from desire. When you become free from desire, what happens to you? You enter into the state of nirvana. What's nirvana? Nothing, or nothingness, or void, or because when material desire, when desire is gone, where's the living entity? There's no concept of living entity. It's just there's nothing. There's something because you have desire, and when you don't have desire, there's nothing. End of story. The enlightenment. Vaishnavas, the root cause of suffering is ignorance. And because the living entity by nature has desire, when ignorance influences desire, it becomes ignorant desire. And when you have ignorant desire, you do ignorant activities. And when you have ignorant activities, you have suffering. So go back to the root. What's the root? Ignorance. What's the solution? Knowledge. The knowledge that's just saying, you know, knowledge, because there's no shelter. So when there's shelter, then remove the ignorant desire by removing ignorance, and you have pure desire. What's that? Service to Krishna. That's our constitutional position, service to Krishna. So start there, service to Krishna position, and it will help enormously for ignorance to be removed, and having no ignorance, you have spiritual desire, which is service to Krishna. So that's our teaching, and it's right here in Uddhava Gita, naturally. Now remember the context. The context is, Uddhava's asked a very specific question: how do I become free from attachment? Because I know that from attachment I can't know you properly. So these are instructions how to become free from attachment so that one can know Krishna properly. That is, engaging in service. And that's what Pingala wants to do. She wants just, I'm not going to serve these worldly men anymore. I'm going to serve, I mean, it's not just serving. She wanted two things: money and enjoyment. She realized there's no shelter there. I don't want neither the money nor the enjoyment. I don't want these temporary objects, men, and the enjoyment that comes from being with men and all of that. I'm finished. My enjoyment is from now on going to be accepting what comes naturally without worrying about it, because he's very kind. He's been so kind, he's taken me out of this attachment position. So he'll continue to be kind, and necessities, they'll be there. And so the focus is on, in loving mood, being the servant, like Lakshmi, of the Supreme Lord, as husband. And that's how she wants to live her life. And it's specifically, she uses the language surrender. But it's not just giving things up kind of surrender, it's dedication kind of surrender. And for necessities, whatever comes, I'll be satisfied with whatever comes. Because that was one of the questions in the commentary. When you take this position of taking full shelter, what are you going to do? This is what I'll do. I'll be always, in all circumstances, meditating on serving. She speaks of the Supreme Lord within the heart. There's no indication of the form of the Lord that she wishes to serve and become the wife of. But it's not exactly supersoul, because how do you become the wife of supersoul? So there's no indication that I'm aware of what form of the Lord, but it's a principle that she's accepted. And her bhakti really took off by some mercy. And she is acknowledging how fortunate. Such mercy, the detachment and the attachment, both. Because she was suffering, her anguish was, nobody came. So I'm not going to get money, I'm not going to get enjoyment. Those two things. So, but yet, who doesn't have those? I'm not getting sufficient money and I'm not getting sufficient enjoyment, because the hankering for enjoyment of whatever the varieties of enjoyment. So it's not just suffering brings bhakti. That was discussed in previous sections elaborately, with many examples and practical experience. Suffering doesn't, in and of itself, bring bhakti. It doesn't even, in and of itself, bring detachment, necessarily. I mean, it's temporary, because the tendency to be the enjoyer is still there. So it really takes shelter. And somehow she's got that shelter by some slight service. So we're harder cases than Pingala. We do lots of service and we're still attached. Maybe it's we're making offenses. Because she wasn't making offenses. Certainly sinful. So we have some ways to go. But she's giving some very nice instructions. So let's see if there's some discussion. 8:10.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I was thinking how to tolerate the effect of detachment.
How to tolerate detachment?
Yeah, means effect of detachment.
The effects of attachment. How to tolerate the effects of attachment. That's your question? Well, the instruction to do so is a starting point. You know, this is chapter 2 Bhagavad Gita. Matra sparshas kaunteya. The instruction to do so, because with knowledge and instruction to do so. That is, this attachment to what? Something temporary is here this moment and gone the next, or certainly gone. So attachment breeds suffering because it's temporary. And it doesn't come out the way that, so there's an expectation for enjoyment, it doesn't come out enjoyment, so it is suffering. So knowledge and instruction, tolerate. So okay, I'm a stoic. I'm being tolerant. My mind is going, but I'm being tolerant. So really, the more complete form of tolerance is you withdraw from asat and you invest in sat. That's a more complete form. And then a more complete form than that is param satyam dhimahi. But, you have to start somewhere. And so hearing topics about Krishna, it helps with the Param Satyam Dhimahi. That's Bhagavatam. Read the Bhagavatam. Okay. Yes, back in the corner.
I have a question on Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas. Like you said, the Krama Sandarbha is a commentary verse by verse. I was curious to know the other Sandarbhas. Like in one of the previous classes, you mentioned there is Preeti Sandarbha, which talks about Prayojana Gyan, and there is, I forget the other two. But how is the format of the other Sandarbhas?
Okay. The word Sandarbha is a term that Jiva Goswami explains what a Sandarbha is. It's a particular form or format or a type of literature. The Sandarbha has its characteristics. So the layout of the Sandarbhas is, there's 6 of them. The first 4 primarily deal with Sambandha. And the names, Tattva, Paramatma, Bhagavat, and Krishna Sandarbha. They're in sequence. After Krishna Sandarbha comes Bhakti, Abhideya, then Prayojana. That's 6. 4 + 1 + 1.
So is Jiva Goswami like picking different verses from Bhagavatam which refer to Sambandha, Abhidaya, and Prayojana and putting them in different verses?
A very, brilliant sequence. You know the history? Oh. The history is the document, the book, was the notes of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Gopal Bhatta Goswami heard from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu directly for the 4 months of the rainy season. So he knew Lord Chaitanya's teachings. And based upon that association, he then assiduously studied Srimad Bhagavatam and kept careful notes. Didn't have a computer, he just kept careful notes on the topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. And what form it was in is unknown, at least I don't know. But he gave that manuscript to Jiva Goswami saying, please organize it nicely and publish it, because these are the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which are the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam in some order. So then he took the manuscript from Gopal Bhatta and filled it out. What that was made up of is unknown to me. But he then, brilliantly organized it in that fashion. He even comments somewhere, I know this from Radhika Raman, that I don't need to write a Brahman Sandarbha because Adi Shankar has already done a good job. So Paramatma, Bhagavan, Krishna. And then the first of the Sandarbhas is Tattva Sandarbha that has 2 parts. The first part is Pramana, Khanda. Khanda means section. And what's the authority upon which when we want to know something about transcendence, what's the best authority to know about transcendence? And his conclusion is Bhagavatam is the best. There's many parts, and it leads up to that. Then the second half, I don't know how to best characterize, second half of Tattva Sandarbha, the first of the 6, is he takes some points and takes, he knows what other people say this, and he takes those other points and says, makes a statement. And then there's arguers, the Purva Paksha people, they'll say, no, 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 it's that. To that argument, here's a refutation, and so on. He takes general lay of Sambandha. And then he goes into Paramatma, Bhagavat, Krishna Sandarbha, Sambandha. Bhakti Sandarbha is the largest. In terms of volume, numbers of verses, and very, very detailed explanations.
Thank you.
Subha.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. In the subject matter of ignorance as the source of suffering and vidya or knowledge, to actually be able to deal with that, the importance or the counteractive part. I was just thinking the importance of not only learning but also teaching devotional service in the mode of goodness, specifically for the majority, many of us who are in the mixed devotional service, so we're still affected by false ego, and so the modes of nature, whatever it is, comes through in our devotional service. So the importance of the focus of learning and teaching devotional service in the mode of goodness, and with some emphasis also in lifestyle. And I'm thinking Krishna saying, to be a yogi, you have to have regulations of work, sleeping, eating, entertainment. What is it? Is it
Recreation.
Yeah, recreation, that type of thing, lifestyle. To be able to be a yogi, to be able to actually, achieve, elevate yourself. So if you can comment on that, if this is clear.
Well, my comment hearing what you just said is more important than those two is exemplifying the qualities. Receiving, giving, and being. That's my comment. I know people that have studied and they can speak. I mean, it's Sanatana Goswami says this. Some people are very learned and their behavior isn't good. Some people, their behavior seems to be very good, but they're not very learned. But you, Haridas, you have both. So, achar, character, conduct, that's the real display, because that speaks louder than words. That's my comment. But yes, I mean, I'll go to what I think what you want me to go to. When you had the Bhakti Love thing, one of the areas that's important for yoga students to understand is lifestyle. You can't just have a practice and that lifestyle doesn't match the practice, or have a philosophy and the lifestyle doesn't match the philosophy. It's something better than nothing, but it's pretense, and it can be misleading. So the alignment of the intelligence and the body, this iceberg example, the behaviors, lifestyle, and what you understand and what your convictions lie. But then the consistency won't be there unless the life of transcendental knowledge is what's operating all the time in your life. Otherwise it's going to be still mixed. Anyway, those are some thoughts. Let's go to online. We have some online.
From Alicia Israni. Maharaj, a jiva can only be raganuga, right? Like we have heard that we should follow the Brajbasis who are ragatmika.
Well, I'm not sure what the question is, but we honor Prahlad Maharaj and Ambarish Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj, and they weren't Raganuga Bhaktas. They weren't following eternal associates of Vrindavan.
I think the question is, can a jiva become a ragatmika devotee?
No.
Or,
Oh, is that the question?
yeah. She says, a jiva can only be a raganuga, right? Like we've heard, we should follow the Brajbasis who are ragatmika.
My understanding is we're always followers of the Ragatmika devotees. I don't think even the aspiration to become one. You can become a perfected soul, be happy with that. These are eternal associates, Nitya Siddha personalities. Next.
That's the only one there. I have a question.
Okay, fine.
What I understood, what I recall from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is that the culture of Raganuga refers specifically to Braj.
It's both are mentioned. I'll send you the texts. Both are mentioned. That's what you said is correct. And there are other passages that say something else. It's a little confusing. I'm sure there's an answer, but I don't have the answer right at the moment. I'm seeking those that may have the answer. I'll, because he wrote a book about it, Damodar Maharaj is likely. And there's 2 chapters where he touches on this. Anyway, so without going into it further, both are stated. And look at this. I mean, it's very explicit, isn't it? She, Pingala, is not following the eternal associates of Vrindavan, but the terminology Ragatmika and Raganuga are being used. So how does that work with those statements that are in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that you're referring to? I don't have an answer, do you?
Of how it's considered Raganuga?
No. Is Raganuga only applicable to following the Ragatmika devotees in Vrindavan? Their statement is there in Bhakti Rasamrita. So the question is, how do you match that against what we just read? I don't have an answer, do you?
Well, if she's aspiring for the mood of Lakshmi.
No, not the eternal associates of Vrindavan. She's not aspiring to, be a follower of Radharani or one of the gopis or something, or that genre. That's not her thing. There's no indication of that. So rather than dwell on something that's got a question mark over it, let's see. There's two persons. I mean, let's see. I want to wait till find out what Damodar Maharaj writes. Then I plan to write to Shivaram Maharaj because he's deeply absorbed in this topic, and see what their thoughts are. And it's not necessarily they're going to agree with each other, but I want to hear because they're deeply absorbed in that topic, and I'm patient. It's going to take. It's because my experience is in topics like this, there are divergent views. And divergent views doesn't mean if this one's right, then that one's wrong, and vice versa. But, anything over here? Yes, Krishna Archana.
One of the commentaries that you read, Sharan Swami spoke about that one's mood of service changes into a kind of parental mood if one's performing deity worship. And in the context of Pingala, it seems the implication was that since that wouldn't be the route she's following, then her particular mood of, I guess, being in a kind of wifely role wouldn't go into that parental mood just by virtue of the fact that she's not doing deity worship. So we perform deity worship, and the idea is that our mood becomes one of wishing to care and protect. And so it seems it's more oriented towards serving, and in some sense, hearing how she's expressing herself, it still sort of seems a little bit of focus on her happiness. So I was wondering if there's some subtlety of the service moods being really reinforced just by virtue of the fact that one's performing deity worship.
Protection, yes, because the other, the Lord is my husband. Yeah, I mean, as you were speaking, I was thinking three things. Yes, but there's what we hear is that leads to parental affection. And parental affection is not consistent with husband. So she's not doing deity worship. She's, according to what Jiva Goswami is writing, she's got this Raganuga Bhakti mood towards, let's say, Lakshmi, and wants to be like Lakshmi. That's what previous commentary says. So that's one thing. So yes, protection, but it leads to a different place. That inconsistent place for husband. Now, second is the ideal wife of husband, let's say, Radharani or the gopis or Lakshmi and Narayan or Sitaram. Service is there. And there's an intimacy in that service that's, boundless, but it's not the service subsides. There's protection in the service mood, but elevated personalities, these are perfected souls, and those that are followers of those perfected souls, they're protected by the mood of service in a different way. And then there's a third. That may be an answer to this earlier question, that is, in Vaikuntha, there's no, to my knowledge at least, there's nobody like Lakshmi in Vaikuntha. You don't become like Lakshmi in Vaikuntha. You become like the wife. She's got an exclusive service. So where are there situations other than Vaikuntha? It's more elevated. And with Ram, he has only one wife. So it's where is that? It's Krishna Loka. But where, we don't have this information of what kind of love she became inspired towards. But Dwarka, Mathura, and Vrindavan, that kind of love is there, where Krishna has multiple personalities who he is associating with. And to be like one of his queens, or to be like one of the gopis, that's reasonable. In Ayodhya and Vaikuntha, it's not. Then that may hold a clue to how she's being ascribed by Jiva Goswami as. And that's a side note. But your specific point was about deity worship. And I responded to that. for our stage, yes. And then as bhakti grows, then another mood may evolve besides the parental affection mode. Okay. This is high topics. Prabhupada ki jai.